The unfaithful husband's last surprise. The pristine corridors of St. Thomas's Hospital in London resonated with the constant beeping of medical equipment, a sound that had become far too familiar for Eleanor Harrison over the past 8 months. Late autumn sunlight filtered through the vertical blinds, casting striped shadows across her hospital bed. At 34, Eleanor's once vibrant features had been ravaged by aggressive chemotherapy, and her honey blonde hair had long since been replaced by colorful silk scarves that her sister, Olivia, brought her each week. On this particular Wednesday morning, Eleanor was propped on her pillows, absently touching the diamond wedding ring that now hung loose on her slender finger. Her husband, James, was supposed to have visited yesterday, but he'd called with another excuse about an important property meeting he couldn't postpone. It was the 3rd time this month. "Mrs. Harrison." The soft voice of Dr. Rachel Chen pulled Eleanor from her thoughts. The oncologist stood at the doorway, a clipboard in hand, her expression carefully neutral. "Do you feel up to a conversation about your latest test results?" Eleanor managed a weak smile. "Of course, Dr. Chen, though I have a feeling I already know what you're going to say." Before the doctor could reply, rapid footsteps sounded, and Olivia burst into the room, her designer handbag swinging wildly. I'm here, so sorry I'm late. Traffic was absolutely dreadful on Knightsbridge." She hurried to Eleanor's side, taking her sister's hand. At 31, Olivia was the spitting image of what Eleanor used to be. Tall, athletic, with the same honey blonde hair and warm brown eyes. "Just in time," Dr. Chen said, closing the door behind her. "I was about to discuss Eleanor's latest scan results." The atmosphere in the room grew heavy as Dr. Chen pulled up a chair and began to explain the new developments. The cancer had spread more aggressively than they had anticipated. The experimental treatment they had hoped would buy them more time wasn't working as expected. Eleanor listened with an unnervingly calm expression, while Olivia's grip on her hand grew progressively tighter. "How long?" Emily asked, her voice firm. Dr. Chen's professional demeanor softened slightly. "Without aggressive intervention, 3 or 4 months at most." "I'm so very sorry, Eleanor." Olivia let out a choked sob, but Eleanor simply nodded, as if receiving confirmation of something she had long suspected. "Thank you for being honest with me, Dr. Chen." After the doctor left, Olivia turned to her sister, tears streaming down her face. "We need to call James. He should have been here for this." Eleanor's lips curved into a bitter smile. "He's busy, Liv. Important meetings. You know how he is." "Busy? Busy?" Olivia's voice rose sharply. "He's your husband, for goodness sake. And where on earth has he been spending Aunt Martha's inheritance? Because it certainly hasn't been on your treatment." "Liv, please." Eleanor sighed, though a flicker of pain crossed her features. Her distant aunt's inheritance had been substantial, almost £5 million. James had insisted on managing it, claiming his financial expertise made him best suited for the task. Lately, however, Eleanor had begun to doubt some of his investment decisions. A knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Sarah Powell, one of the floor's newest nurses, entered with Eleanor's medication. Tall, striking, with perfectly coiffed dark hair and an expensive-looking nurse's uniform, Sarah had only been working on the oncology ward for a few months. "Time for your morning medications, Mrs. Harrison," she announced with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. While Sarah administered the medication, Eleanor suddenly felt a wave of nausea, different from her usual symptoms. Rushing to the bathroom, she barely made it in time. Olivia followed, holding her sister's hair back as she vomited. "This is new," Olivia commented, concerned. "Should we call Dr. Chen again?" But Eleanor had frozen, a strange expression crossing her face. "Liv," she whispered, "what's the date today?" October 15th. Why? Eleanor's hands began to tremble. I'm late. Very late. Late for what? Olivia asked, before sudden comprehension dawned on her face. Oh my God, Eleanor, you're saying… I need a pregnancy test, Eleanor said, her voice trembling. Now! The next hour passed in a whirlwind of activity. Olivia hurried to the hospital pharmacy, returning with a test. When the 2 pink lines appeared, Eleanor stared at them in disbelief, tears finally breaking her composed facade. This can't be happening, she whispered. The doctors said the chemotherapy. They said it would be impossible. We need to tell James, Olivia insisted, already pulling out her phone. No, Eleanor gripped her sister's wrist with surprising strength. Not yet. I need time to process this. But as Eleanor lay in her hospital bed that night, alone with her thoughts, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The way James had been acting lately, the missing money from their accounts, the constant excuses. And there was something about Sarah, the new nurse, something in the way she looked at Eleanor with those calculating eyes. Little did Eleanor know that, at that very moment, James Harrison was signing a check for a deposit on a luxurious penthouse in Knightsbridge. Across the table, Sarah Powell, who hadn't been a nurse for very long, ran her fingers along the rim of her wine glass, a triumphant smile on her perfectly painted lips. To new beginnings, she purred, raising her glass. James clinked his glass against hers, no trace of guilt on his handsome face. To us, he replied, and to Eleanor's degenerous Aunt Martha. May she rest in peace. The fierce autumnal wind howled outside the expensive restaurant's windows, bringing with it the first hints of the approaching winter. But the true storm brewing would make the weather seem tranquil in comparison to the devastating revelations to come. A desperate choice and a chilling discovery, the revelation of her pregnancy sent ripples through Eleanor's carefully constructed world, transforming her last months into something far more complex than she could have imagined. In the days following the discovery, she found herself divided between hope and desperation, between the miracle growing inside her and the cancer consuming her body. A week after the pregnancy test, Eleanor sat in Dr. Chen's office, accompanied by Olivia. The oncologist's face was grave as she reviewed Eleanor's latest blood test. The situation is complicated, Dr. Chen began carefully. Your pregnancy is very high risk, Eleanor, and continuing with the pregnancy means we'll have to modify your treatment plan significantly. Some treatments will have to be suspended completely. What does that mean for her timeline? Olivia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Chen's silence spoke volumes before she finally responded. Instead of 3 or 4 months, we could be talking about 6 to 8 weeks, perhaps less. Eleanor's hand moved instinctively to her still flat abdomen. And the baby? With immediate intervention and bed rest, there's a small possibility the baby could survive long enough to be viable. But Eleanor, you must understand that carrying this pregnancy to that point would almost certainly mean sacrificing what little time you have left. The weight of the decision hung in the air. Eleanor closed her eyes, tears slipping down her emaciated cheeks. I want to try, she whispered. This baby is my last opportunity to leave something of myself. Later that afternoon, Eleanor finally mustered the courage to call James. The phone rang 5 times before going to voicemail. She tried again and again. On the 4th attempt, he finally answered, sounding irritated. Eleanor, I'm in the middle of something important. James, I need you to come to the hospital. There's something we need to talk about, something important. There was a pause followed by muffled voices in the background. Can't it wait until tomorrow? I'm closing a big deal here. No, it can't wait. James, Listen, darling, I have to go. Clients are waiting. I'll try to pass by tomorrow, all right? The line cut off before Eleanor could respond. She stared at the phone in her hand, a strange numbness spreading through her chest. Olivia, who had been feigning not to listen, could no longer contain herself. "That's it. I'm hiring a private investigator. You're alive, aren't you?" "No, Eleanor. This has gone on too long. He's barely been here for you. He's been making excuses about Aunt Martha's inheritance money, and now he doesn't even bother to come to the hospital when his dying wife needs him. Something isn't right." Eleanor wanted to argue, but she was too tired. Besides, a part of her had begun to suspect Olivia was right. The way the new nurse, Sarah, always seemed to be around when James visited. The whispered phone conversations she'd overheard him having in the corridor. The growing discrepancies in their joint accounts. 2 days later, Olivia burst into Eleanor's hospital room, her face red with anger, her hands clutching a manila envelope. "You need to see this," she said, her voice trembling. "The private investigator works fast." Inside the envelope were dozens of photographs. James and Sarah in expensive restaurants. James and Sarah entering a luxurious apartment building. James and Sarah shopping at Tiffany's. But it was the last photo that sent a chill down Eleanor's spine. James and Sarah, passionately kissing outside St. Thomas's Hospital, right beneath the window of Eleanor's hospital room. "There's more," Olivia said grimly, pulling out bank statements and property records. "He's been liquidating your inheritance. Nearly £4 million, Eleanor. He's been spending it on her. Jewels, a penthouse, expensive trips. And get this, Sarah isn't even a real nurse. She got the job using fake credentials, probably to watch you." Eleanor stared at the evidence of her husband's betrayal, feeling something inside her shatter. But along with the pain came something else. A cold, clear anger she had never before experienced. "How long?" she asked in a low voice. "According to the private investigator, at least 6 months. They met at a bar right after your diagnosis. She knew exactly who he was, who you were, and about Aunt Martha's money. This was calculated, Eleanor." That night, as Eleanor lay awake in her hospital bed, she began to plan. The baby inside her might not survive. She might not survive, but she would make sure James Harrison remembered her until the day he died. A plan for retribution over the next few weeks. Eleanor put her plan into motion. She made several private calls to her aunt's old lawyer, Mr. Davidson, who had always held a special fondness for her. She arranged for new documents to be drafted, modified her will, and set up a series of events that would unfold after her death. James continued his pattern of brief, distracted visits, never staying more than 15 minutes. He still hadn't noticed her pregnancy, though she was beginning to show. Not that it mattered. She had lost the baby 3 days after seeing the photographs. The stress and her weakened body couldn't sustain the tiny life within her. She didn't tell James about the miscarriage. She didn't tell him anything anymore. Sarah continued working her shifts, apparently unaware that Eleanor knew everything. The woman had the audacity to act concerned, to touch Eleanor with false sympathy while administering medications. Every touch felt like a burn now that Eleanor knew the truth. One particularly audacious afternoon, Sarah even tried to initiate a conversation while changing Eleanor's IV drip. "Your husband seems so devoted," Sarah said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It must be difficult for him to see you like this." Eleanor looked directly into Sarah's eyes, her gaze fixed. "Yes, James has always been good at acting devoted. Tell me, Sarah, do you like the emerald necklace he bought you? The one from Tiffany's?" The IV bag slipped from Sarah's hands, splashing liquid across the floor. Her perfectly composed face cracked for a moment, revealing the calculating creature beneath. I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah stammered, quickly regaining her composure. "No." Eleanor's voice was soft, almost gentle. How strange, because I have a beautiful photograph of you wearing it while kissing my husband in front of this very hospital. Green suits you very well." Sarah fled the room, leaving the IV dripping onto the floor. She never returned to Eleanor's ward after that day, calling in sick and finally resigning from her post. As Eleanor's condition rapidly deteriorated, she focused all her remaining energy on finalizing her plans. Mr. Davidson visited her frequently, helping her organize everything down to the smallest detail. The old lawyer's eyes often filled with tears as they worked, but Eleanor remained lucid and focused. "Are you sure about this?" he asked one afternoon, after they had finished signing the last of the documents. "It's not too late to change your mind." Eleanor touched the simple mirror she had asked him to bring, an antique piece with an ornate silver frame. "I'm sure, Mr. Davidson. Sometimes the cruelest punishment isn't taking everything from someone. It's forcing them to look at themselves and truly see what they've become." Olivia, who had barely left her sister's side throughout all this, worried that Eleanor's desire for revenge was consuming her final days. But Eleanor seemed more at peace than she had been in months. "I know you think I'm wasting my time on this," Eleanor told her sister one night, while they shared a pint of smuggled ice cream. "But this isn't just revenge, Liv. It's justice. It's about making sure that when I'm gone, James will never be able to forget what he did. Every time he looks in a mirror, every time he sees his own reflection, he'll remember. And perhaps, just perhaps, it will make him think twice before doing this to someone else." As October turned into November, and November began to fade into December, Eleanor's condition worsened drastically. The cancer was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated, accelerated by the stress of the lost pregnancy and her discontinued treatments. James, apparently oblivious to the change in his wife's behavior, continued his sporadic visits. If he noticed Sarah no longer worked at the hospital, he never mentioned it. He was too preoccupied with his phone, with his important meetings, with the life he was building on the foundations of his wife's suffering. What he didn't know was that Eleanor had already set the wheels in motion for her final act. The papers were signed, the arrangements made, and the trap laid. All that remained was for Eleanor to close her eyes for the last time, something that, according to Dr. Chen, would happen very soon. As the first winter snow began to fall outside her hospital room window, Eleanor Harrison smiled faintly, thinking of the storm that would soon engulf her husband's carefully constructed world of lies. The mirror lay wrapped in the drawer of her bedside table, awaiting its moment to reflect the truth to the man who had betrayed her. What do you think Eleanor's ultimate surprise for James will be at the reading of her will? What's the most elaborate act of revenge, real or fictional, you've ever heard of? And why was it so impactful? Share your thoughts below. The unveiling of truth. A cold December morning saw James make an unexpected appearance at the hospital. For once, he wasn't wearing his usual expensive suit, but casual clothes, a clear sign he'd come from somewhere other than work. The scent of unfamiliar perfume clung to his collar. "Eleanor," he said, trying to sound concerned, "I've been thinking about your treatment options. I've had to make some difficult decisions about the inheritance money." Eleanor observed him with quiet intensity. As he paced the room, delivering a carefully rehearsed speech about investment losses and market downturns, she noted how he wouldn't meet her eyes, how his hands fiddled with his wedding ring, a nervous habit he'd developed in recent months. "The thing is," he continued, "most of the money is tied up in long-term investments. We may need to consider moving you to a less costly facility." Olivia, who had been sitting silently in a corner, suddenly rose. "Are you serious, James? Less costly? Do you mean a facility that wouldn't notice if its nurses had fake credentials?" James's head snapped up. His face paled slightly. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about," Olivia spat. How long did you think you could hide it? The affair, the money, everything. I don't know what. Enough, Eleanor interrupted, her voice calm but firm. I know about Sarah, James. I know about the penthouse, the jewels, the holidays. I know everything. The silence that followed was deafening. James stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then something shifted in his expression. The mask of the devoted husband vanished to reveal something colder, more calculated. Fine, he said, his voice now harder. You want the truth? Yes, I'm with Sarah. Yes, I've been spending the money. What did you expect me to do, Eleanor? Sit here and watch you die? Waste my life in hospital rooms? Sarah makes me happy. She makes me feel alive. Eleanor absorbed each cruel word without flinching, while Olivia looked ready to physically attack him. But Eleanor placed a restraining hand on her sister's arm. Leave, Eleanor said calmly. And James, don't bother coming back. He left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him with a decisive finality. Only then did Eleanor allow herself to cry, silent tears streaming down her face as Olivia held her close. That night, Mr. Davidson made another visit, bringing with him the final drafts of Eleanor's revised will and several other important documents. Everything's in order, he assured her, his kind eyes full of sympathy. The trusts have been established, the donations arranged, and the timing of the revelations carefully planned. Are you absolutely sure about the mirror? Eleanor touched the smooth surface of the antique mirror, more certain than ever. James has spent his entire life only seeing what he wants to see in his reflection. It's time he saw the truth. As December progressed, Eleanor's health declined rapidly. The cancer was spreading aggressively now, and the pain had become almost unbearable. Despite everything, she clung to her plan, finding strength in the knowledge that justice would finally be served. James never returned to the hospital after his confession, according to the private investigator, who continued to send updates to Olivia. He and Sarah had taken a luxurious holiday in the Maldives, using the last of Eleanor's inheritance money to stay in an overwater villa that cost thousands a night. He's going to lose everything, Olivia said one night, reviewing the investigator's latest report. The penthouse, the cars, the investments. It's all in your name, Eleanor. When the truth comes out. When the truth comes out, Eleanor finished faintly. He'll have nothing left but his own reflection, and that will be his greatest punishment. The hospital room had become a kind of command center, with Mr. Davidson and Olivia working tirelessly to ensure every detail of Eleanor's plan was perfect. The mirror lay waiting in its drawer, its ornate silver frame gleaming each time the drawer was opened, like a promise of justice to come. As the year drew to a close, Eleanor felt her strength fading, but she held on, determined to see her plan through to the end. The stage was set, the players were in position, and soon, very soon, James Harrison would learn the true cost of his betrayal. The night Eleanor Harrison died was bitterly cold, with snow falling silently outside her hospital room window. She passed peacefully in her sleep, holding Olivia's hand, the antique mirror safely tucked away in her bedside table drawer. It was December 31st, the last day of a year that had changed everything, the unforgettable inheritance. James and Sarah were still in the Maldives when the call came. Olivia had insisted on being the one to deliver the news, her voice cold and clinical as she informed her brother-in-law of his wife's passing. The funeral is in 3 days, she stated flatly. Try to tear yourself away from your holiday long enough to attend. You wouldn't want people talking, would you? The funeral was held at Westminster Abbey, a grand event Eleanor had meticulously planned. She had specified every detail, from the white roses adorning her coffin to the music that would play. The church was packed with mourners, friends, family, colleagues, and even Dr. Chen, who sat quietly at the back, her eyes red-rimmed. James arrived exactly 7 minutes before the service began, wearing an appropriately somber black suit that still carried the fresh scent of department store tags. Sarah had the audacity to accompany him, though at least she had the good sense to sit several rows back, attempting to blend into the crowd. Throughout the service, James played the part of the grieving widower to perfection. He dabbed his eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, accepted condolences with a well-practiced look of devastation, and even managed to deliver a brief eulogy that had several elderly aunts reaching for their tissues. "Eleanor was the love of my life," he declared from the pulpit, his voice hoarse with manufactured emotion. "She fought so bravely, and I was with her every step of the way." In the front row, Olivia's knuckles whitened as she gripped the armrest, while Mr. Davidson, seated beside her, wore an expression that might have been a mocking smile. The real drama, however, began 3 days after the funeral, when James received a call from Mr. Davidson's office requesting his presence for the reading of Eleanor's will. The solicitor's secretary specified that he was to come alone, with no guests or legal representation. James arrived at the solicitor's office dressed in another new suit, this time navy blue with discreet pinstripes. He carried himself with the confidence of a man expecting to inherit millions. Sarah waited in a cafe across the street, no doubt already planning how they would spend their fortune. The conference room where Mr. Davidson received him was imposing, with dark wood paneling and views of snow-covered Hyde Park. Olivia was already there, along with a court stenographer and a videographer, another of Eleanor's specific requests. "Before we begin," Mr. Davidson said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "Mrs. Harrison left explicit instructions that this proceeding be recorded in its entirety. I trust you have no objections?" James waved a dismissive hand. "Of course not. Can we proceed?" Mr. Davidson opened an elegant leather folder and began to read. "I, Eleanor Catherine Harrison, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this my last will and testament." What followed was nothing short of theatrical. First came the small bequests, jewelry to cousins, books to friends, her art collection to various museums. Then, Mr. Davidson cleared his throat and moved to the main event. "With regard to the remainder of my estate, including all funds inherited from my late Aunt Martha Harrison, all properties acquired with said funds, and all investments made therefrom." James leaned forward slightly, a hungry glint in his eyes. "I hereby bequeath the entirety of these assets, valued at approximately £4 million, to be divided equally among the following charitable organizations: the Royal Marsden Cancer Charity, St. Thomas's Hospital Oncology Research Department, and the National Domestic Abuse Helpline." The color drained from James's face. "What?" "Furthermore," Mr. Davidson continued, seemingly oblivious to James's distress, "I direct that all properties acquired with my inheritance, including, but not limited to, the penthouse apartment at 1 Hyde Park, be liquidated immediately, with the proceeds directed to the aforementioned charities." "This is ridiculous," James spluttered, rising from his chair. "She can't do this. That money was for me. I'm her husband." "Please, Mr. Harrison, be seated. There's more." James collapsed back into his chair, his carefully maintained facade crumbling. "To my husband, James Alexander Harrison," Mr. Davidson read, his voice taking on an almost theatrical quality. "I leave 2 items. Firstly, this letter, to be read immediately." He produced a cream-colored envelope and handed it to James, who took it with trembling hands. "And secondly," Mr. Davidson continued, as Olivia reached under the conference table and pulled out a familiar wrapped package, "this mirror." James stared at the antique mirror as Olivia placed it before him, its silver frame glinting under the office lights. With trembling fingers, he opened Eleanor's letter and began to read aloud, as per Mr. Davidson's instructions. My dearest James, when you read this, I will be gone, and you will find your carefully laid plans shattered. Yes, I knew about Sarah. I knew about the penthouse, the jewels, the holidays. I knew everything. I also knew about the baby, our baby, whom I lost while you were buying emeralds for your mistress, the child you never knew about, because you were too busy building a new life on the foundations of my death to even notice I was carrying your child. But this letter is not about punishment, James. It is about reflection. The mirror I have left you is very special to me. It belonged to my grandmother, who gave it to my mother, who gave it to me. It has seen 3 generations of women in my family face their truths, both beautiful and ugly. Now, it is your turn. Each morning, when you wake up, I want you to look into this mirror. Truly look. See the man who could leave his dying wife alone in a hospital while he courted a fake nurse. See the man who could spend his wife's inheritance on trinkets for his mistress while she fought for her life. See the man who lost the chance to be a father because he was too selfish to be a husband. The mirror will never lie to you, James, though you have spent your entire life lying to yourself. And perhaps, just perhaps, one day you will look into it and finally see yourself as I saw you in the end. Don't bother looking for the money. It's gone. Don't bother trying to contest the will. Mr. Davidson has made it unshakable. Don't bother running to Sarah. She too will leave once she realizes there's nothing left for her to take. All you have now is your reflection, James. I hope you learn to live with it. With all the love I once had, Eleanor. The silence that followed was absolute. James stared at the letter, then at the mirror, his face a mask of horror as the full implications of his situation sunk in. This is impossible, he whispered. The money, the penthouse, it's being impounded at this very moment, Mr. Davidson informed him calmly. Your joint accounts have been frozen, and the property management company has been notified of the change of ownership. Ms. Powell has already received eviction papers. As if on cue, James's phone began to vibrate. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, accompanied by a series of increasingly frantic text messages. James, there are people at the penthouse with papers. They say we have to leave immediately. What's happening to our accounts? James, answer me. James's world continued to crumble in that conference room, as Mr. Davidson methodically explained the full extent of Eleanor's arrangements. Not only had she distributed her inheritance, but she had also documented every penny James had spent on Sarah, every fraudulent transaction, every attempt to conceal money. By the way, Olivia added, her voice dripping with satisfaction, the Nursing and Midwifery Council has been very interested in our documentation regarding Sarah's falsified nursing credentials. The police are probably speaking with her right now. James slumped in his chair. His expensive suit suddenly seemed baggy on his frame. He lifted the mirror with trembling hands, staring at his reflection. For the first time, he seemed to truly see himself, not the successful businessman he pretended to be, but the fraudulent, unfaithful husband he had become. There must be something left, he mumbled more to himself than to anyone. The house in the Cotswolds, my investment accounts. The house was purchased with Eleanor's inheritance, Mr. Davidson explained patiently. As for your personal accounts, well, it appears most of your money went towards maintaining quite an expensive lifestyle with Ms. Powell. The credit card statements are quite revealing. James's phone continued to ring incessantly. Sarah's messages grew increasingly desperate. The bank says our accounts are frozen. They say the credit cards are canceled. James, I'm being served with fraud charges. Where are you? Olivia watched her brother-in-law's disintegration with cold satisfaction. She pulled one last envelope from her handbag. Eleanor left you something else to see, James. She wanted you to know exactly what you threw away. Inside the envelope were ultrasound photos, grainy black and white images of the baby that never had a chance to live. The date indicated they had been taken just days after Eleanor discovered James's betrayal. She was carrying your child while you were buying Sarah that Cartier bracelet, Olivia said softly. She lost the baby the day after she saw the photos of you two together outside her hospital room. She never told you because you never gave her the chance. James stared at the ultrasound photos. His hands trembled so violently he nearly dropped them. In the mirror's reflection, he could see his face crumple, the reality of what he had done finally hitting him with full force. Mr. Davidson cleared his throat. There is one more thing. Eleanor made a video statement before she passed. She asked for it to be played now. The videographer set up a screen, and suddenly Eleanor's face appeared before them. She was clearly near the end, her features emaciated, but her eyes burning with purpose. Her voice, though weak, carried an unmistakable strength. James, if you're watching this, then everything has gone as planned. You're probably angry. You're probably feeling betrayed. Good. Now you know what it feels like. But this isn't just revenge. This is justice. Consequences. It's looking in the mirror and facing the truth. I loved you, James. I loved you enough to want to bring your child into this world, even as I was leaving it. But you couldn't even give me the dignity of honesty in my last months. Instead, you made me watch as you built a new life with someone else, using my death as your stepping stone. The mirror I have left you belonged to the strongest women I have ever known. They used it to face their truths, to gather their strength to rebuild when life broke them. Now it's yours. Use it well. And remember, every time you look into it, that your reflection is all you have left of the life you threw away. The video ended, and the room fell silent once more. Outside, the snow continued to fall over London, blanketing the city in a white canvas. But inside that conference room, James Harrison's world had become permanently dark. His phone had stopped vibrating. A quick glance showed one last message from Sarah. "Don't bother calling. I'm done. You're not worth the fraud charges." James picked up the mirror again, staring into it as if expecting his reflection to show him something different, something better than the truth. But Eleanor was right. Mirrors don't lie. And in that moment, James Harrison finally saw himself with clarity. A man who had destroyed everything he had in pursuit of a fantasy that had vanished like the morning mist. "The car service is waiting downstairs," Mr. Davidson said quietly. "It will take you wherever you need to go. Though I should mention that the lease for your Knightsbridge apartment was in Eleanor's name. Those papers have also been served." This is such a powerful and poignant ending to Eleanor's story. What do you think James's life will be like now, stripped of everything? And what's the most valuable lesson you've ever learned about the true cost of betrayal? Share your thoughts below. The path to redemption. 2 months after Eleanor's death, James Harrison sat in a small studio flat in Peckham, a far cry from the luxurious penthouse he had shared with Sarah. The antique mirror hung on the wall opposite his bed, exactly where he could see it first thing in the morning and last thing at night, just as Eleanor had intended. The consequences of the will reading had been swift and merciless. Sarah had disappeared completely, leaving behind only the lingering scent of her expensive perfume and a series of increasingly hostile voicemails before she blocked his number entirely. The police had questioned her about her fraudulent nursing credentials, but she had managed to flee to Mexico before they could press charges. James's professional life had collapsed spectacularly. News of his behavior during Eleanor's illness had spread through London's property circles. Former clients distanced themselves, partners dissolved their associations, and his once golden reputation was now irreparably tarnished. Today, he prepared for his first job interview in 20 years, not for a prestigious role in property development, but for an entry-level sales position at a small property management firm in Hackney. The suit he wore was one of the few things he'd managed to salvage from his previous life, though it now hung loosely on him. Before leaving, he did what he had done every morning since receiving Eleanor's letter. He stood before the mirror and truly looked. "What do you see?" he whispered, echoing the question his court-ordered therapist, Dr. Patterson, had taught him to ask. The therapist had been Olivia's idea, part of her own journey toward healing. She had also told him about the Hackney job, though she still couldn't speak to him directly. The reflection stared back. A man in his early 40s, hair now more gray than brown, lines deeply etched around his mouth and eyes. But it was the eyes themselves that had changed the most. The arrogant glint had vanished, replaced by something darker, more tormented. His phone vibrated. A text message from his younger sister, Kate. She was the only family member who still spoke to him, and even she kept her distance. "Don't forget to eat something before the interview. And James, remember what Dr. Patterson said about owning your story." Dr. Patterson, his therapist, had been working with him on accountability. No more excuses, no more deflections, no more carefully crafted narratives to hide behind. Just the raw, ugly truth of what he had done. The tube journey to Hackney was a new experience for a man who had once refused to travel anywhere without his private car service. He found himself studying his fellow passengers, wondering about their stories, their struggles, their losses. He had never done that before. He had never truly looked at people beyond what they could offer him. At one stop, a young woman boarded, clearly in the late stages of pregnancy. Something about her reminded him of Eleanor, of the ultrasound photos he now kept in his wallet. When the train lurched, she stumbled slightly. James immediately rose, offering her his seat. "Thank you," she said, smiling wearily. "Not many people notice anymore." "I notice now," he replied softly, more to himself than to her. "I notice everything now." The interview was scheduled at a modest office building in Dalston. James arrived early, sitting in a small cafe across the street to collect his thoughts. The last time he'd been in Hackney was to scout potential development sites, properties he'd planned to buy and flip using Eleanor's money. His phone vibrated again. This time, it was a reminder from his therapy app, Daily Reflection. What truth are you facing today? James took out his wallet, pulling out the ultrasound photos he now carried everywhere. They were worn from use, the edges soft. He had asked Olivia, through Kate, if she had any others. She had sent him a USB drive containing hundreds of photos of Eleanor during her illness, moments he should have been there for. But he wasn't. "Mr. Harrison?" The receptionist's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "They're ready for you now." The interview room was small, with views of the London skyline through grimy windows. 3 people sat at a folding table. Tom Chen, the firm's owner, Maria Rodriguez, the HR manager, and, to James's surprise, David Turner, a former client he'd worked with in his previous life. "James," David said, his expression unreadable, "I didn't expect to see your name on our candidate list." "I didn't expect to be on it either," James replied honestly, "but here we are." "Indeed." David leaned forward. "Why don't you tell us why you're here? The real reason, not the polished version." James looked at each face around the table. Then he took a deep breath. Dr. Patterson's words echoed in his mind. "Your story is ugly, but it's yours. Own it." "I'm here because I destroyed my life," he began, his voice steady. "I betrayed my dying wife in the worst possible way. I squandered millions of pounds that weren't mine. I became someone I can barely look at in the mirror, though I have to. Every day, because my wife made sure of that in her will. The room fell silent as James continued, laying bare every ugly detail of his downfall. He watched their expressions shift from astonishment to disgust, to something akin to understanding, as he described his ongoing therapy, his attempts to make amends, his daily struggles with the mirror that forced him to confront himself. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," James concluded. "I don't deserve it. What I'm asking for is a chance to start over, to be someone different from the man I see in that mirror every morning." David Turner leaned back in his chair, studying James with a mix of disdain and curiosity. "Why should we trust you? Your past behavior demonstrates a complete lack of ethics and moral compass. You shouldn't trust me," James countered. "Not yet. I haven't earned it. But I will, every single day, if you give me the chance." After the interview, James walked along the Thames path, watching the London skyline shimmer under the winter sun. His phone vibrated with a message from Tom Chen. "We need to discuss some additional details. Can you come back tomorrow?" That night, as James sat in his small studio flat, eating a takeaway from the local Chinese, he pulled out his therapy journal. Dr. Burr Patterson had insisted he document his journey, not for anyone else to read, but as another form of reflection. "Day 67 without Eleanor," he wrote. "Last night I dreamed of her, not the Eleanor at the end, thin, angry, and knowing everything, but the Eleanor at the beginning, who laughed at my bad jokes and believed in me more than I deserved. In the dream, she was holding our baby, the one we lost, the one I never knew until it was too late. She didn't say anything, just looked at me with those eyes that always saw right through me, even when I couldn't see myself." A knock on his door interrupted his writing. When he opened it, he found Olivia standing there, awkward but resolute. "Kate told me about your interview," she said without preamble. "I thought you should have this." She handed him a box and turned to leave. "Olivia, wait!" James called out. "I know it means nothing, but I'm sorry. I'm so very sorry." She paused, not turning around. "You're right. It means nothing. But Eleanor would want you to have these things. She kept everything, you know? Every cinema ticket stub, every birthday card, every stupid little note you ever wrote her. She believed in you until the very end. That was her tragedy." After she left, James opened the box with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, letters, and small mementos of his life with Eleanor. At the bottom was a diary, Eleanor's diary from before her illness. He read it all night, tears streaming down his face as he discovered the wife he had never truly known. She wrote about her hopes for the baby, her fears of dying, her growing suspicions about his betrayal. The last entry was dated just 3 days before her diagnosis. "Dear James, when someone reads this, I will be gone. The purpose of the mirror I leave you is not just to punish you, though God knows you deserve it. It is for hope. The hope that somewhere within the man who could betray me so completely, there is still the man I fell in love with. The man who used to bring me coffee to bed, just because. The man who learned to tend the garden because he knew it made me happy. The man who stood by me through 3 miscarriages and still wanted to try again. That man is still there, James. I have to believe that, because this baby deserves to know that version of you, the true you, not the person you've been pretending to be lately. If you're reading this, it means something has happened, either something wonderful or something terrible. Either way, I want you to remember who you are, not who the world thinks you are or who you think you need to be, but who you are in your heart. I love you, James. I love you enough to forgive whatever comes. I love you enough to believe you'll find your way back to yourself, even if I'm not there to see it. Always yours, Eleanor. James slumped to the floor, the letter clutched to his chest. Olivia watched him, her own tears now falling freely. She never sent it, Olivia said quietly. She found out about Sarah the next day. Everything changed after that. Why are you giving me this now? James asked, his voice hoarse. Because Eleanor was right about one thing. You did find your way back to yourself. Too late for her. Too late for the baby. But maybe not too late for something else. What do you mean? Olivia took a deep breath. The Memorial Wing. They're starting a program for cancer patients' families, support groups, counseling, resources. They want someone to talk to families about what not to do, about how to support their loved ones. They want you. James looked at her in disbelief. Me? After everything I did? Because of everything you did, and because of everything you've done since. You're living proof of the worst and the best of human nature. She paused. Eleanor would want you to do it. James took out the mirror again, studying his reflection in the fading light. The face staring back was older, sadder, but somehow more real than it had been in years. I'll do it, he finally said. Not for redemption. I don't deserve it. But for the truth. For Eleanor. Olivia nodded. The house goes on sale next week. But Eleanor's garden? I thought maybe you could help maintain it. Not own it. Simply keep it alive for her. As they walked through the house for the last time, turning off lights and locking doors, James paused at the threshold of what was to have been the baby's room. Do you think she knew? He asked. When she planned everything with the mirror, with the will, do you think she knew that I would eventually understand? Eleanor always saw the best in people, Olivia replied, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. She touched his arm briefly, the first willing contact she had initiated since Eleanor's death. Don't waste her faith in you, not again. Outside, the snow had begun to fall again. Blanketing Eleanor's dormant garden in a white shroud, James carefully tucked the letter into his pocket, alongside the ultrasound photo he always carried. In his other pocket, the mirror pressed against his heart like a reminder. Goodbye, Eleanor, he whispered to the empty house. I'm sorry I couldn't be who you needed when it mattered, but I promise you, I swear, I will be who you always believed I could be. Every day for the rest of my life, I will look in your mirror and try to see what you saw. As he walked away, the house growing smaller in his rearview mirror, James felt something shift within him. It wasn't forgiveness. He would never forgive himself. It wasn't redemption. That wasn't his to claim. But perhaps something akin to a purpose. A chance to turn his greatest shame into something meaningful. To help others avoid his errors. To keep Eleanor's legacy alive in ways she might have wished. If this story touched your heart, and you want to continue seeing inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that appears on your screen will also move you, so click on it now, and we'll see you there.